Good morning, everybody. I have two teaching posts, regular teachings. One is already done, ready to go. I was going to post that today. Then I was going to go finish the Gospel of Mark. All that we're going to have to put off. Last night, when I read I was just looking for the article of when Judge Manuel Benyalas' vehicle ran into those tech stop workers. I couldn't find it because they got rid of it. The color Times. I want some light. So as I was looking, I posted some other articles that had to do with that wreck. I was wrong. The wreck was much worse. The criminality of what Judge Manuel Benyalas did was much, much worse than I thought. I assumed that Judge Benyalas was driving on the highway and that there were tech stop workers on the lane where sometimes you see them right off of the highway. It was a turn going into Highway 37. Those turns are posted. If you ride those, which I do a lot, and on a motorcycle you got to be careful, you could see on a lot of these turns here that are ramps going onto the highway off across town and all. Look, you got to go slow on those because you could see many people have hit those barriers. There's a lot of, marks on those barriers. So you got to basically do what that says. Judge Benyalas, when I read one of those reports, his coupe de ville went off of the highway. Those tech stop workers were, I don't know, maybe 50 yards on grass up a hill. Judge Benyalas' coupe de ville went up the hill, off of the highway, on the grass. The one tech stop worker said he saw it coming. It was flying up a hill on grass. And he jumped out of the way. He said his friend, the other worker, was kneeling down and didn't have enough time. Then the vehicle not only went into that man, it hit the cherry picker, and one of the vehicles, I guess the cherry picker, went like another 50 yards. This could be considered one of the worst. Texting, phone, losing control of the vehicle, it could be considered probably one of the worst in Texas, because what you have is called the mechanisms of injury, mechanisms of wrecks. And what you do is you figure out the particular speed that a vehicle was going by how far it went, maybe before it hit a truck, up a hill. This is what came to light when I read one of the reports on this. And after it traveled so far up a hill, on grass, not on the side of the road, it then still had the kinetic energy to send a cherry picker or a truck, hit a cherry picker of one of the vehicles, then went like another. This could be considered one of the most criminal acts in texting, the speed of the vehicle. This wasn't hitting somebody on the side of the road. So this could go down as one of the worst ever in Texas. Most of the wrecks we went to, if somebody actually hit a civilian, it's normally like on the side of the road. This would be the standard of criminality in the area of losing control of the vehicle. When the Colder Times said he was doing 75 and a 35, they were lowering it. And that's how you figure how fast that vehicle was going. And one of the reports said for it to have gone up a hill, which I was not aware of, way into the grass. These tech stop workers were not on the side of the road. And even after it traveled all that distance, it still sent the cherry picker, which is a much larger truck, flying another. So that's how you investigate those crimes. That's how you say this was not just. And Mark Gonzalez in Nueces County, even if you hit somebody on the side and you're texting, meaning you didn't even go travel 50 yards and then another 50. That's your justice system. And the other thing that came to my mind, just as I was praying this morning and decided we're going to talk, so that's what I want you to see. This wasn't just an average. It was tremendously loss of control of the vehicle at a tremendous rate of speed, traveling up an embankment, after travel so many yards, hitting a cherry picker, hitting a truck, then sending it. Any investigation would tell you this was not a normal just swerving. It's much, much, much worse than average accidental hit somebody. Mr. DeRice, he hit a bicyclist at night. And obviously, that's still considered a crime because you maybe went a few feet over or a few inches over, meaning we're not in the right of way at that moment. But to go 50-something yards, then to send another vehicle 50, that's way. You as a white citizen, you'd be in prison for life. And I'll give you one now. On this wall, I have all the prayer things I put up for all cases of people that have had accidents, sent up, whatever. I just pray for them. There was one woman, I can't remember the name, and I think it was San Antonio. And the reason I put her up there was she was coming home one evening. I read the article, and she was an older woman whose husband, I guess, died, and I think she had a jewelry store. She was old, white lady, 70 maybe, 67. She was coming home one night, at night. Believe it was San Antonio, but this is the case. And the cops there was a wreck on the highway at night, and the cops had stopped. Now look, you're taught when we were at wrecks, we're taught to position the vehicles, the ambulance and all. There's certain ways you're supposed to park on a highway just in case somebody runs into you. Your ambulance is not in front of you and you're right in the direct line of traffic, but you're parked in a certain way. This is all taught. But these officers, one of their vehicles was in the road at night, but they were at a scene, a wreck or something that they were already at. But one of their vehicles was actually in the road. And it's easy if you're doing the speed limit, not maybe 91 or 150. It's still easy for you to not see a vehicle at night because you're going down the highway. And she didn't see it. Now, when this lady came upon the cop's car that was in the road, because they're at this incident, she hit it. Now I don't think she did Emmanuel Benalis and sent a cherry pickle flying 50 yards up an embankment. No, this was not that. But this lady was white. And she stopped, and she didn't realize that an officer on the other side of the other vehicle was pushed into the guardrail, and he died because he was right in front where he probably shouldn't have been standing. She didn't know, and she stopped. She got out of her vehicle. She was very, upset. But because she stopped, she said, I didn't even see it. I guess they said, well, yes, we're here and so forth. Now that woman was sent up for many years in prison because her not knowing, this is what stuck with me in that case, her not realizing another officer died at that scene. And they reported during the trial that when she was standing there that night, when she got out, and they let her leave the scene, by the way, but they reported that she didn't seem real distraught. She wasn't as upset as she should have been because an officer died, but she didn't know. And so the witnesses in that case, when they went after this white lady, said, yes, she was kind of like, oh my, she was too flippant after she intentionally went out to murder cops. That's how they reported it, which was not true. And then they sent her up for many years. Now, and I put her to pray for her. I said that was an injustice that they did to that lady. So this incident of Judge Vinales was much worse. Much worse. I thought it was just the side of the road. His Coupe de Ville traveled up an embankment. Many 50 yards in. Then after hitting it, the cherry picking away. This would be like a classic case that you would say the rate of speed on that vehicle was so illegal. So I figured we'd just let you see. Let you see. I don't trust what they do here. You know, I've had multiple times the last year or so where I was out, just on this, multiple times, at the park where my daughter used to be a lifeguard, Bethany, at Parker Pool. And cops roll up on me and say, you cannot be here. We're putting you on notice that where you are in this public park, not drinking, not breaking any law, but we kind of roll up on you, white man, and we're putting you just on direct notice. We have told you, John, you're not allowed to be here. Now, if a citizen then responds and says, you mean I can't be in public? The officer could say at that point, you're resisting what I told you, and possibly blow your head off and say you resisted arrest. Things like that have happened. I saw my friend Henry not too long ago. Henry's a homeless friend. Seen him walking down Waldron. Many years ago, Henry was a homeless friend. Good man, Henry. But he wanted to tell me one day. He said, before you hear it, John, the cops put the handcuffs on me last night in front of HEB. And now Henry doesn't get into, he's not a user or drug user. He's a really good Christian man, Henry. And so he wanted, I said, well, what happened? And he said, nothing. They came up to him and maybe asked him a question or something. I forget what it was. And, of course, there was no laws being broken. But then they decided, we're going to put cuffs on you, boy. Though we don't have the right to, because we do what we want here. And then they cuffed him, putting him on notice. We run this place, and if we run into mediums and go off and flip them, if we run into, I reported. I emailed Chief Simpson once, made a complaint of an officer. So I emailed the chief. In any city, you should be able to have an open. It was just a day or two later that same officer tried to run me off the road at a high rate of speed on the Oso Bay Bridge. I had the impression that they resented a black man being their chief. That's the impression I had. I have Tanya Simpson. Chief Simpson died. I have Chief Simpson's picture up here. Because when I do the prayers for all of these, I have some officers up here. I pray for their families, officers who died. And here's Chief right here. I'll hang it up again later. So you're lying, John. Okay, you see the Chief? I got a prayer then. It's a scripture. But that's Chief Simpson. So I pray, this is a reminder to pray for Tanya and his family. Now, after I notified the chief of criminality by officers in this department, then to have one of those officers try to run me off the road showed me these guys are rogue, is what that showed me. And there's documents of that email, unless you all destroyed it by now. But then the chief died. And he liked riding motorcycles like I do. He had a Harley Davidson. And he went to Rockport, one of the cities we talk about, to like a shrimpery or whatever. And he loved riding his Harley. And the chief was well loved in this community. But I always wondered if the white officers in this community, or if the older Hispanic community, who also have showed racism towards black people and whites, and have covered it up because they advocate so forcefully for prejudice against Mexicans, which I'm against prejudice against Mexicans. But they do not advocate, and some hold their own racist views towards blacks and whites. And that yet they still think they're for the defense. They still have this concept, la raza, meaning the race. And did you ever have an incident where you picked up somebody when you were at the fire department? Yes, this is where the whole joke came up, like we kid at the firehouse. There was some Mexican guy, Hispanic guy. We picked up the ambulance. I wasn't on the ambulance that day. Maybe a shooting or whatever. But the ambulance went to get him. And when the guys got back, who were Mexican friends of mine, they said that because he was involved in something, he looked at the ambulance crew, and our uniforms used to look like cop uniforms, and I hated that. And he said, La Raza, like, brother, in this part of the country, he might have been involved in a gangster. He said, but I'm familiar with other Mexican cops, which we look like when don't forget La Raza. It's like the hidden thing. If Mexicans are involved in such criminal acts, we sit down in our little Nueces County prosecutors and all, and we say, La Raza, don't forget the race. At all costs, we must defend Judge Beñales because of the race. But when this white lady accidentally runs, which was a million times less criminal, which she did because there was a vehicle in the road, but the race, let's send her up for life. So I emailed Simpson, and then an officer tries to run me off the road who the complaint was made against. So it's interesting. So then he's coming back from Rockport on his Harley Davidson, and a younger kid, teenager or younger, legally able to drive, hit or swerved into Chief Simpson's lane, riding his Harley back. Lost control, and the chief died. So they looked into that, obviously. They said the kid fell asleep, no alcohol or anything. Just so happened that Chief Simpson's blood alcohol level was very high. They reported it was just like a decimal point below the legal limit. I don't know if there's anything else there. Did the person that was in that crime, did he have any connections with any officers that might have been getting investigated? I don't know if he did, but I would wonder. Did you resent that there was a black police chief? The community seemed to have embraced Chief Simpson. I wonder those things. I sure do. Just the fact that you would have a citizen make a complaint, questionable, that a certain officer, and then for that same officer to then attempt to run you off the bridge, would show me you got problems in this community. And then you tell me on multiple occasions, just roll up to me, you can't be here anymore. Which is the initial thing that you will say to a person to begin documented. Oh, we already told this person he's not allowed to be in public. We've already put him on notice in uniform. We don't want to see you here anymore. That's the initial thing that you begin to document. Meaning then, if later on you see that person and something happens where you put a bullet in my head, then you could have a little record of, we already notified him. We already notified him that his boundaries in this community are not to be in public. You say, well, Henry got the cuffs put on him. No crime, no loitering. Just, we've notified you, white citizen, that at any moment we'll put the cuffs on you as a citizen. At any moment, we do what we want out here. And we're immune from prosecution. We're immune from judges committing now probably the most serious vehicular criminal injury inflicted upon a citizen, which happened to be a tech stock, because of the mechanisms of that wreck. Up an embankment, not on the side. And went at such a high rate of speed that even after it went 50 yards, then hits a cherry picker, which is a truck, and sends that one another 50. So the rate of speed was tremendously high. But just remember, to all my white friends out there, if you even dare accidentally, or if you even dare go in public, because officers had informed you, you are not allowed to be in a public park. We've put you on notice. We have said to you, and don't you dare question us. Don't you dare ask us, citizen, well, why am I not allowed to be in a public park? Don't you know, John, we told you. And we had loaded weapons when we informed you of that. Our same group that after you reported one of us to Chief Simpson, tried to run you off the Oso Bridge, which was documented. And then when all that information goes in, I'm assuming they laugh. I wonder if they sit back and say, La Raza. I wonder if they say, no, La Raza. We are here to protect our race. And if we rise to levels in DA or law or judges, it is our goal to cover up the crimes of Hispanic Mexican judges, because we are the race. Does that affect you? That would be just as racist as covering up the death of a black man. Just as racist as covering up the death of a Hispanic person or of a white person, because you think the crimes of possibly a Hispanic figure in the community should be covered up. That if a white Tom Greenwell is found dead in his court with a bullet to his head, and national media question that, if you found a Hispanic judge dead in his court with a bullet in his head, that would be looked into seriously. That wouldn't be flippantly done, because there was never a full airing of that in the community media here. And if you had a suicide note and one of the cases said he was in debt, one of the national media things said there was a question of blackmail, because Mr. Greenwell was in debt with it. So we'll start with that.